Next up, we do have from 2016, Beyond the Gates. The plot is a somewhat interesting one. After the mysterious death and disappearance of a father, two brothers come together, two very different brothers, come back to their hometown, to the father's video store, and they eventually find a VCR board game, which is sort of like a VHS tape, only sort of like with a game that you can play along, which is something I'm not personally familiar with, but I'm guessing was probably a thing in the 80s. And over the course of playing this game, some creepy supernatural things begin happening. Eventually, they sort of try to, I'm not even sure, find their father's soul. Like,
Yeah.
I'll be honest, there's some things in this movie that I'm not sure if they're explained out that well, in my opinion. It's one of those movies that has a very flashy appearance. It has some fantastic 80s aesthetics. I'm not even from the 80s, and I just got a complete 80s vibe from this. Fantastic music, fantastic lighting, pretty much everything aesthetically about the movie works out really well. The only downside is the story. It's just not that great. Some of the performances are decent, but I'm not sure if any of the performances necessarily would blow anyone away. But the biggest problem is the story just feels a bit hollow at times. It seems like they cared more about getting the feeling of the 80s vibe down as opposed to constructing a great story. If they had done both, the movie would have been fantastic. Despite some really decent aesthetics, the story is just not that great, in my opinion.
I think the plot is actually a good idea. They just didn't execute it very well, and I don't know if that was because of the budget or they just kind of ran out of ideas on what to do with it. But yeah, they just never really served it enough justice for what its potential was. There are a few decent moments where it has like a cool gore scene, and it does have a nice 80s flavor to it with some of its music and, like you said, the aesthetics. I did start out enjoying the movie, and as it moved along, it just started to feel a little more flat. Like, I kind of just expected more than what it ended up delivering.
Well, I think that's a common feeling. I think the movie starts out pretty strong. For me, it's about maybe 25, 30 minutes into the movie, I start sort of, I'm sort of losing interest in this. I do think the two brothers, the two actors, do an okay job, but there's just so many story issues. It's not like I said, it doesn't feel like it's fully finished. That, despite everything that the movie does right, and it does do, like you said, it has a fantastic 80s feel to it. Despite everything it does right, it just doesn't have enough to entirely hold my interest. I think that's based on reviews I've read for the movie. I think it's a somewhat common feeling.
And the two brothers, for me, I mean, like you said, they do okay, but one thing that kind of irks me is that they just don't look like brothers at all.
Yeah, yeah, they don't seem anything like brothers.
Comparing myself to my brother, you can definitely see that we are related. So, with these two guys, you put these two guys together, it's about as far away as you can get.
Yeah, they look like two actors who were hired for a movie to play
Yeah.
two brothers, which
Yeah.
is not necessarily the best way to go about it.
Yeah, the board game video or VHS board game, that was a fairly popular thing back in like the late 80s, early 90s.
To my knowledge, this is probably one of the few movies that I've seen that really played with that. So, like you said, it definitely had potential, but the final product just could not live up to everything that you would hope for.
And I believe it was Barbara Crampton who played the person on the actual VHS tape. She did okay.
She didn't do that much, but I mean,
She didn't do a whole lot, but the few moments where she's kind of just waiting for you to actually do something with the board, and there's a little creepy vibe going on there.
yeah, I suspect that Crampton was mostly there just to give some big name recognition. Since she was in some classics like From Beyond and Chopping Mall. So
And Reanimator.
yeah, Reanimated probably biggest classic. Yes,
Yeah.
just a movie I didn't particularly like, but it's okay.
I'm kind of surprised she didn't get her tits out because she normally does.
Well, maybe once you get past 35, it's not a thing that women want to do.
If she did that, maybe my rating would have been higher.
uh, I do like the typical guy stuff. Well done.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the only other thing that I really wanted to mention was just that weirdo store owner in the movie.
That guy cracked me up so
Yeah,
much.
just the way he speaks, it was just so silly, but kind of fun. Yeah.
Like, from my understanding, that guy's not a particularly big name or a name at all. He has very few credits on IMDb, so I'll be honest, I sort of enjoyed his performance. He seemed to be having a lot of fun. So his scenes might have been probably past the 30-minute point. His scenes were probably the most fun I've had in this movie. Like, the last, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of the movie, just by that point, I was pretty much done. Things were extraordinarily chaotic. Things weren't necessarily explained that well, and despite their aesthetics, at that point, there's just not enough to keep me engaged, which is probably the biggest problem with this movie. There's such potential for Beyond the Gates, and a lot of the movie looks cool. I think the poster, at least the most common poster, I think that's fantastic. And it's probably one of the best 80s nostalgic movies, like nostalgic of the 80s, that I've seen, aside from maybe Summer of '84, which is a new movie that came out last year. But it had a fantastic 80s vibe to it. But the story was just something that really they could have done so much more with. I mean, I think I'll probably just give this a 6 out of 10. It's a decent idea, but it's a below average movie, and it might be worth a watch, but 6 out of 10, I think, pretty much covers how I feel about this.
Yeah, same for me. I give the movie a 6 out of 10 as well. Like I was saying, it's got a good idea. They just didn't execute it well enough. It was okay in the grand scheme of things, but there's just so much more they could have done with it, and possibly the budget was a part of that because some of the set pieces just felt small and cheap. Like the ending just felt cheap to me.
Yeah.
Like it just had a couple of guys tumbling around in a room, and that was it.
Yeah, Beyond the Gates is probably one of those movies that I suspect people would maybe watch once, maybe twice, and despite some okay things, they pretty much forget about the next week.